So I hope I'm live. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all well. Welcome. Hello, Garrett. Who else do we have here? We have Jim. Hello again, Jim from Madison. Good to see you. Is that Jasper as well? We have Green Thumb. Welcome all. I'm glad you could all make it. We've got a very interesting live stream today because I'm going to do something special with it. Hello, AV. Hello, Jason from Malta. Very, very nice. So, yes, it's going to be interesting. So I haven't done a vlog this week. So what I will do is I will talk about vlog type things at some point in this video and then talk about all the things I want to talk about and turn this into a sort of a proper video as part of a sort of changing things about a bit, which I can talk about later. So hello, David from London. S-Mill, as always, hello and welcome. 23 risks. And who else got an over in there? Holland as well, and Vegas. Whoa, we have quite a diverse group of people here. That's marvelous. So, where do we start? We've got 20 people come. So yes, as people join, this will be a sort of there'll be a bit of weekly update, a bit of updates on all the videos, some exciting news about some new things I'm going to release to you all over the coming few months. I'm very excited. So where do we start? And I think probably the best place to start having a chat, something you all may be familiar with, is the Genius Neanderthal video. So I don't know if any of you have seen it. I know a couple of you have because I recognise your names. But and we'll talk about the world tree as well, Vladagast. We will. I promise. And not just to say I'm putting off the video for another week. We'll talk about some wonderful things as well. So, but the Genius Neanderthal that received some really good comments. It created a lot of discussion. It seemed like about half the people felt they already knew that Neanderthals could talk. Let me make myself bigger here. That's probably better. And it was just common sense. But half the people hadn't really thought about it before, hadn't seen some of the things. So that was really interesting to hear that. And what we didn't have so much commentary about in the comments is about the hypothesis at the end, which is that if the ancestor of Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalis could speak, does that mean our stories and talking could be over 1 million years old? And if so, what were they talking about? So that's something, I'll touch on in a second. Jim saw it. We saw, Neanderthals are making fire. So that's something I mentioned in the Neanderthal video that they were using in the instance I gave some form of manganese, which if you've ever used it in chemistry lessons, it was the silver wire that almost had this white flame to it, bright white flame. But they were putting that on wood for the fires to help them light. But what has been found in the UK, in fact, what I can do, because I was semi-prepared in rather than how I normally work, which is just completely ad hoc, I do have, there we go. Let me show people, because I had share screen, stop screen, and share a new screen with there. So what I don't know if you can see that, but that is from the BBC, which people are noticing about fire. And what seems to have happened is that we have discovered that Neanderthals were making fire around 400,000 years ago, and they were using what we call fool's gold. And just for Bob, who said, "Is this a flat Earth channel?" Absolutely not. So, but yeah, that's quite fascinating. So, what the thing here is that it isn't that Neanderthals. It's the first time we see them with fire. It's the first time we actually see them uh, with making fire. If that makes sense. So starting a fire rather than using existing fire and continuing that. So I hope that sort of makes sense. I've broken my screen here somewhat, but hopefully everything's good. Yes, that's a really good point as well, Lindsay. So if you want to do super chats, you can. You don't have to. I'll try and answer as many questions as I can near the end of the uh, video. I'll do that because I've got some things I do absolutely want to go through. But if you do want to ask a question, not via super chat, put a Q at the start of your comment. That way I can look through the comments really quickly, and anything that starts with a Q, I know to be a question. So the BBC posted an article, and the reason the BBC did that is that they had exclusive access via the British Museum, who were sponsoring the archaeological dig in East Anglia, which was where the fire was found. That's why that is there. Let me I don't know what's gone on with my screen. You can't see it here, but I've lost my interface for talking to you guys. But hopefully you can hear too. You really didn't start the fire. No flat Earth. No. Still, why people are still going on? Doesn't make any sense to me. Um, if Neanderthals were using specific minerals to help start fire, was gold in effect 400,000 years ago, it's almost certainly was being used long before then as well. It's really interesting to see in that, well, it didn't find any more cases of that. The Bruniquel cave I talk about, where basically on the bone, on the stalagmites there, they put blobs of animal fat and sort of lit those with wood flames. Uh, they may well have they must have brought torches into the cave, but they must have really good control of fire to be able to take flames, so far back, like 1,000 feet, 300 meters into a cave through tunnels, uh, to do that. So I think we had, a a really good, use of fire. We were technically competent in the handling of fire for hundreds of thousands of years. But it's really nice when you get to see evidence like this. Right. So, um, uh, by the way, when you see my screen, is it full or do I have borders? Because it's strange here. Ah, young Helen. Hello, Helen. Good to see you. Uh, yeah, right. Someone's asked about the history of writing. I will definitely talk about writing as well. Uh, And if I forget, nudge me, and I will definitely talk about writing. That's one of the things. I actually have an agenda I've written down, so I don't go off it. But anyone who knows me will know without doubt that even though it's written down, I will go off it. But I do have writing in there because some interesting things. I've got borders. Thank you. No idea how to fix that. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Well, I don't know if they were there in the beginning. But hey, so what's this one do? Oh, there we go. Look at that. I'm not a technical IT person. Right. So back to Neanderthals. One of the things I didn't mention, and I didn't realise it at the time, but this sort of upset me a bit. I was really disappointed with myself in was music. So there's two things that came out from the discussion with the Neanderthals. One was lots of people talked about painting. which we've seen before, and one people and then some people talked about the music. So, this painting was one. Fix the microphone. Our sound is a bit blocky. Why would sound be blocky? Sound should be better. Okay. No, right, so what's happened was I had a browser on that was linked to my YouTube channel, which came up in the background showing this stream. So hopefully it's better. Excellent. There we go. So I'm super IT technical now. I've gone up 2 notches in about 30 seconds. So where were we? All right. So yes, cave paintings. Everybody wanted, or a lot of people wanted to talk about the cave paintings and particularly what these different things is, where the chat is. I'll turn the chat off a second on the stage. We see this image. So we've got these dots going in a curved momentum. We've got this ladder type structure. At the top of the ladder, there is the rear end in fine line of what probably is a bovine, and the bottom panel of that ladder, you've got the front end of what appears to be a bovine, and then we've got this thing which I called a time machine. But I absolutely have no idea what it could be, but it's certainly finely drawn. It isn't like it's just an abstract blob. A hummingbird with beak stuck in branch. That's, possibly. I don't know if you've got hummingbirds in. Well, you might have got hummingbirds in the region. So that's a propeller boat from Florida. Yes, an airboat. It is interesting. So that was one of the things people spoke about. But the other thing I forgot to mention was musical instruments. So this is around 60,000 years old. And so we believe it's used by Neanderthals. And Neanderthals are making music. Then one, they need to have the planning and forethought to make a musical instrument. This couldn't have been a one-off. They must have made many before this to perfect that. But if they're making music, well, if they're making a musical instrument, you then assume they are making music. And if they're making music, you have to assume they're doing something to that music, like singing or dancing. And we see that ritualization in singing and dancing often to come with stories. So apologies for not mentioning that in the video. I should have, although I do have a video all about music, which talks about this. But that is, to me, is another really clear indicator that Neanderthals were storytellers. So, I guess the question is, what stories were they telling? And as I say, I think certainly stories about death, possibly love, maybe. Why are we here? And hero type stories of hunting the biggest animal. They were almost certainly in there, and I think there have been stories as well being told as long as we've been able to tell stories as hominins. But there is just no way of knowing, I think, or reconstructing those stories. We just have no way of doing that, unfortunately. So if anyone thinks they can do that, I would be very surprised. Which it brings me to, I think it might have been Lequillic, it might have been Dehoy, Julian Dehoy, who wrote about creation myths and suggested that they could potentially go back to pre-Homo sapien times to in effect reconstruct creation myths from that time. And whilst the creation myths may be that old, we again still can't tell that, you know, whether non-Homo sapiens were telling stories. There is just no way we can do that at all, purely because the amount of migration Homo sapiens have done in Eurasia, they basically wiped out all the other hominins. So we have no traces left unless we find narrative paintings of such things or carvings, which we don't. I mean, we the only thing we have is the paintings in Spain, and even then, there is some controversy over whether they are actually Neanderthal paintings. So yes, they're questions, and Mr. Clayton has read it, and I saw some other people talking about it, where if humans and Neanderthals, I mean, sort of both are humans at the end of the day. Let's be clear about this. We were so similar to each other. Why couldn't we live together, even if we have no proof of actually doing that? We only have results of mating between each other. We don't actually have proof of being together. But if we did that, there must have been some cross-cultural storytelling, you would have thought, unless it was a very aggressive interaction, as I stated in the video, which the evidence could support that because of the lack of male Neanderthal DNA, I believe. So there's some part of that that suggests that that no male Neanderthals were born in Homo sapien to Homo Neanderthal breeding. Sometimes 76% Slavic Neanderthal. That's interesting. So yeah, things are lost to the sands of time. But talking of stories, a nice segue is to the next piece of news, which Helen, who's on the chat, she had a little chat about that, and I don't know how far she's investigating further, but if I share my screen again, we have this paper released 4 or 5 months ago. Now, I believe the prehistory guys had a little chat about it, which is around a figurine pre-farming, so pre-agricultural farming in the Near East, found in the Near East, pretty much in the middle of Israel, I believe, which here, there's a little red dot on the map. Don't know if I can move my mouse to it. Negi, pronounced. And on the right are sort of examples of the stone image, but the clear one is this one. So we have this stone that looks like a narrative story and it looks to be a goose mounting a woman. So this brings up some maybe hypothesis that perhaps this was using storytelling, and in a story that is very similar to Leda and Zeus, which, if you're not familiar with, Zeus turns into a swan so he can have his way with Leda, because that's what Zeus does. He wants to have his way with pretty much any woman. So that is interesting, because if that is the case, does that mean that story is minimum 12,000 years old? And the thing is, there isn't too many stories in the archaeological record, or certainly in the mythology database, that show such a thing happening, of a man turning into a bird to take advantage of a woman. But we do see many stories of women turning into birds, marrying men, and then going away. And that seems to be reflective of society, where after a family is born, women would often return, or it seems like they would often return back to their original family, leaving the man alone, which is it sounds like a weird concept to us today, but that's what seems to be going on. I'll see if I make that a little larger for you all to see it. But there are some who say that the bird is in a position that does look like they're trying to mate with the woman there. So yeah, that's a very interesting narrative stone, and that will probably be one of the oldest narrative objects I think we've seen. With a story we could possibly apply to it, I guess. So I'll do some more digging into that. I say I know there's some people here. That's how you carry a big bird home, but you wouldn't necessarily carry the big bird home naked whilst it is got its wings around your shoulders. That seems a bit strange. There isn't much in the art that tells us it's a man bird. That's a good question. Apart from the fact that there is a woman in front of it. So I think there's an assumption that if the woman's in front of it and she's naked and there's a man behind it, you can only assume what's going on. And you have to think, why would someone shape the stone to be a bird on a woman unless there was a known narrative of a bird on a woman? So, yeah, it's fascinating piece of archaeology there. And I'll do more digging, and I say I know there's some people around who are looking into it, and if we find anything out, we can share that with you. So I think that's it on the PowerPoint front. So there's just some other things in terms of findings, so which have been in the news this week. So let me share those with you. So share screen. We can go window. We can go Chrome tab. Share. Right. So if you hadn't seen this, New Scientist published something about a month ago now that cave paintings aren't randomly painted onto the wall of a cave. And before going to that, Helen's just raised a good point. Exactly what is so important about having that carving of a goose? Why was it just so important enough to do that? And that is one way of looking at it. The other way is that if you know the story, humans apply what they know, patterns to objects. It's quite a common human trait. And so someone may have seen a rock that looked like that narrative and then just did a little work to shape it. And we see that quite a lot in Paleolithic art. Even there's some caves in Britain, Crec, or something Crec, but basically in the caves there are stone structures that look a bit like a horse, and they've been just shaped slightly to enforce that, and that. So humans obviously saw patterns in the landscape and then enhanced those, and I think that's what's happened. A stone has been found. If that story is common, and it could be a reflex of the magical wife, this wife who turns into a bird, if it's a reflex of that, like a magical husband, that would make sense to me. So the rock's dated to 12,000 years old. So that's where that's coming from. So yeah, in terms of other news, the New Scientist published something about a month ago about cave paintings not being random. So they have been, or some people have found that some cave paintings are in particular parts of caves that, in effect, provide some reverberation for sound. So they do have, if you've got access to New Scientist, they do have some audio files you can listen to. Personally, it was difficult to feel what they were saying, but that's just something that I wanted to point out to you. That if you're interested in cave art and its purpose, it feels like that certainly some parts of caves produce better sounds than others, and some cave art was made in those parts of caves. It sort of seems obvious. Now, the other piece of news that came out was this paper about submerged stone structures in the far west of Europe, so in Brittany. And the BBC, if you don't have access to this paper, the BBC has an article on it. And so what this is showing is that a wall was made, and they theorise that perhaps it was made to help keep the sea at bay. So through sea level rises. So that's about 7,000 years ago. And if you've watched my flood myth video, I talk about some of these stone monuments in this area of France and what they mean. So we have these long rows of stones, these sort of megaliths, and I posited that they could be a magical barrier. So even though it wasn't a long wall, just individual stones, it could be that they were trying to enforce some magic to push the sea back rather than a physical wall, which didn't work, as PsyOps Agent has just posted. So yeah, that was quite interesting. So that's all the major news from the last week that has happened. Now, other things have gone on. So I've released the Neanderthal video. I am working on the Well Tree video, but I had to have a sit down and think, because a year's gone by, and what's happened this year on this channel. So last year I probably gained, in 2024, 100,000 subscribers or so, and it was a very sort of successful year in terms of the channel going. But this year I wanted to slow down a little and try and write a book. But what happened was, I said I'd make one video a month. So what's happened is I've made sort of 1.5 videos a month, made a couple of extra little videos for YouTube members and Patreons, and done a lot of work on the mythology database. So the result is that this year my subscriber has only probably grown about 20,000 or so. I've had about 2 million views still on the channel, which is quite good, I think. I think the channel's had about 16 million in all at the moment since it started, which is just unbelievable to me. Just so many people interested in mythology is incredible. So I was thinking, what can I do? What can I do? I don't like reducing the amount of content I make for you all, but the content I want to make, I want it to be good. I wanted to be, solid and academic. I wanted to write a book so I could put some of my knowledge out there forever, but I failed at that. But I have put the mythology database out there, which has been, again, incredibly successful. We probably get about 200 people a day logging onto that and doing research. I am probably involved in 1 or 2 research projects a week on the mythology database, primarily with students and research projects wanting data. And occasionally we get some independent companies come through. I've just had to turn one down from Spain who said, can we have all your data? We're not going to use it for AI. And I looked their company up and it was like AI data processing company. So, yeah, I don't trust them, but generally I'm helpful in doing that. And I will continue to develop the mythology database. I've got many ideas. We've had lots of, to develop it so that, one, it's more accessible to people who are storytellers and non-academics, because some people don't understand what mythemes and motifs are. But equally, I've just started talking to a chap who is well educated in the world of geospatial data. And so we've had a little chat. He's in Australia, so times don't work particularly well, but we're looking at whether it's possible to create data that reflects a culture's area rather than, say, pinpoint a spot, and whether we can use temporal data. So whether we can sort of have a dial and that will expand a culture and shrink it through time as it would in reality. And if we can do that for the narratives, that may help us really understand possibilities and probabilities of data flow, of data dispersal, migratory patterns of narratives, which will help in the understanding of the probabilities of where stories originate from. So all that's going on. So that's, I'm really looking forward to that as well. So the mythology database will have to continue, but it is a time-intensive piece of work. It's really hard to do anything in there and not spend literally a solid week doing it and ignoring everything else because of the amount of things going on. but say I also don't want to reduce the data I make for you, and I'm not writing my book. So I had a brainwave, and so am writing a solid academic paper on why myths persist. Now, I did write an essay a while ago, which I shared probably on YouTube Members and Patreon, which I did at Oxford, which was a short essay saying what that was. But I'm expanding that to include genetic, archaeological, and linguistic evolutionary information. It will include references you will want to support that evidence, on top of understanding why myths disperse and last longer than other narrative forms, such as folklore, as well as explain the differences in that. So I feel if I create that paper, then with that paper I can, one, make videos on it, on different parts of it, go through each part, showing the references, and it'll be literally like a university lecture. I can make little short videos of it, and if you have that, you will be well prepared. If you were to do a degree in religious history or folklore, you'll be absolutely well prepared to fly through, certainly the first year of your degree, leveraging that data, without a doubt. So that's my aim, is to write a paper. I'll release that properly. I'll DIY it and get it released. Make videos of that for you, and then I've got a foundation for my book as an intro, because I've written a sort of a layman's intro, but people, I hate to do that without being able to create citations and references, and I think you would all want references for that data. So the plan is that if I write this paper, I can then refer to that in the layman's terms of the book. So I hope that makes sense. So that's where I'm going with that. And then once I've written that paper and I've created some content for you to learn about the study of folklore and mythology properly, I can then write a paper about how to use mythemes, and that aspect of it. How to. I won't go into it too much, because there's possibly some new work going on that I don't want to release just yet. But I'll write a paper referring to that, and then that should give a decent amount of educational content. So I will probably do less documentary type videos for the first few months of the year, but do some heavily academic videos for you all. And that will really act as a really solid foundation you can continue doing your own research with, or whatever. But it will provide all the references you will ever need to support what we do, to counter all these pseudo-archaeologists and the like. So that's the plan. That was my big sort of reveal. I don't know how you think about that, but let me know. I'm quite happy. I'm about 25 pages into the paper. It's probably got about 100 references in, and I'm just going through I've just completed the first draft of it. I've now got to go through it again just to make sure my English is good, my references are right, and then I'll probably get it up for peer review. So that's where we are with that. So saying that, I'll also now talk about the history of writing briefly, and then I'll go back and see what questions are up here and try and answer those, if that makes sense. So the history of writing is quite interesting. So someone asked about it earlier, and it's interesting because there was an interesting podcast this week. Sorry, who told me about it? Someone told me that Irving Finkel had been on, I think, Lex Friedman's podcast. Now, Irving's a fantastic chap, works at the British Museum in cuneiform tablets. Very familiar with those, and we consider cuneiform the earliest form of writing. It's probably 5,200 to 5,400 years old, if I remember correctly. But what most people don't necessarily understand is that many of the cuneiform tablets we have come from very restricted finds. So they are not a good sample of the stories being told, not a good sample of sort of information. So it's just quite interesting in that respect that we have misrepresented perhaps uh, the stories out there, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh. Whilst it's the oldest narrative we know, there is older writing, but it tends to be about tax returns and other such things. Um, it may not have been such a prominent story as others, but the others we just haven't found because they're not there. I mean, we were quite lucky, I think, in some of the finds because a library was sacked and set on fire, and the fire solidified the clay tablets. Now, I'll tell you what I think is Irving Finkel's theory, and there's pros and cons to it, I think. So Irving Finkel says, or hypothesizes that writing is far older than 5,400 years old, and perhaps it's as old, people were writing in Göbekli Tepe 10,000 years ago or so. And the reason he says this is because of seals. So we see these, particularly in the Vedic culture, but these are flat stones with iconography on that are used to stamp on things. Now, what are you stamping on for that seal to be useful? Usually you will stamp on writing, something written down. So in the Vedic culture, we see writing, but we also see that some seals are older than the oldest writing we know of in the Vedic culture, which suggests that there was writing going on. We just haven't found it. And that is because most of that writing is probably on organic material, probably like leaves or bark, which we see that quite commonly throughout the sort of early Indo-European cultures that was being used. And those things do not preserve well in the archaeological record. So if we have, so how do we know there is writing? What is the evidence of 10,000-year-old writing? The fact is that in Göbekli Tepe, Irving Finkel has posited that a find of a flat stone with iconography on is a seal. And if that is a seal at 10,000 years old, what are you stamping it on? Because there's nothing in Göbekli Tepe we see that is appropriate for that. And so it could be that it is being stamped on writing that we have lost because that writing was on organic material. And that is very interesting indeed. That is interesting because, one, it suggests that potentially some narratives could have been preserved in written tradition, not oral tradition, although I'm not too sure that is the case because we do see far more administrative records in early writing than we do in narratives. But also what is interesting, what I find a challenge, I would say, is that cuneiform seems to lend itself to being written in clay. It is used with a stick that you dig into clay. You can't do that on a leaf. That doesn't mean you can't write, but it means that there was a different way of writing, and that writing was dealt with differently. It was less permanent. So yeah, it's hard because you don't ever see evidence of what they were writing. So can you say that the world had writing 10,000 years ago based on a seal? I think that is his hypothesis. It's interesting. It isn't certainly something you can dismiss out of hand. I think that is really, really likely. But then I would expect to see more writing or engravings on stones alongside narratives in the 10,000 to 5,000 year ago archaeological record in the Near East, in the Levant, in Anatolia. I mean, we don't necessarily see that. So that's interesting. So that's sort of a side note history of writing, this sort of the Finkel hypothesis. I don't know if anyone else has it. But it could be that Irving has come up with that completely on his own. But is it fascinating? Fascinating. Sorry, needed a drink. So with that, I've ignored your chat long enough. Let me. Do I really want to scroll back to the beginning? But I'll scroll back to the beginning. So anyone new here, if you've got questions, put a Q at the front of your question before you throw it into the chat, and that allows me to pick it up, and we can answer questions about all the things we talked about today and anything else, pretty much. So if I do miss your question, I apologise. But you guys do have some great conversations, and I don't get to see them all until when I watch the show back. So, right. All right, here we go. Question. Show this. So, mythologist, mythographer, folklorist, statistician, paleographer, comparative mythology, whatever database nerd is called, or something else. What's that? Is that what am I? So it really does depend on who I'm talking to and what I'm talking to them about. So, yes, I'm also a failed rock star, and yes, I think that's about it really on top of that list. But yes, so mythographer is a collector of myths. A mythologist is someone who sort of studies myth. A folklorist is someone who either studies myths and folklore or just studies folklore. That's a whole complicated game because you're dealing with words, and words can have slightly different meanings, can be nuanced between different people, so you can get different people think different things. I don't think I'm a paleographer. I'm not. Whilst I have done a course on archaeology, that's only so I could understand the language rather than know much about it. Comparative mythologist, yes, or computational comparative mythologist is what people in the phylogenetic field tend to call themselves. And I did do a lot of IT and AI in my life. So I first came across AI 44 years ago. Now, a program called Alice or Eliza. I think it's called Eliza when I first saw it. By the time I went to Sussex University, I think they called it Alice, which was a basic parsing of data. And I used to love writing adventure programs in text adventures because I loved the way how you parsed that language. And that really influenced me in the use of AI to understand language further on, which is where I spent a lot of my time focusing on that and creating translation tools, which led me to translate things like the Bearskin database long before you had the AI tools to do it properly. So yeah, so that's where I come from. There's a slight bit of background if you didn't know that of me. I'm all specialists in. So yes, I say I'm a specialist in Indo-European mythology on YouTube because I think that resonates with more people. They'd understand what that is. So, someone asked, "Can I talk about the history of writing?" Yes. Right. So, what we also want is how the first markings turned into writing or words. That I'm probably less sure of, but certainly I'd imagine the first writing was very much images of the thing it was trying to be. So, yeah, we see that in hieroglyphics and the like, and early writing in the Near East with like pictures of cows' heads and the like, which slowly change into letters as people get lazy writing it. So the thing is, the difference between writing and speaking is that writing, we can't predict how writing changes throughout time. So it's really hard to understand where certain writing came from. We have that with runes. We're not entirely sure where runes came from. We've got reasonably good guess, but we're not entirely sure. Where when it comes to language is something we would call exceptionless. I guess is a good word, which is that the rules for linguistic evolution tend to be consistent irrespective of the language you're looking at or how it sounds. So sounds will always evolve in the same kinds of way in different languages, which allows people who study language in different parts of the world to compare notes, and that be useful to each other. Which is one of the reasons why we can use linguistic evolution as a real good marker alongside the archaeological record for evidence. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the paper I'm writing, which I mentioned a little while ago. So, that's worth knowing. Let me just see. I've got more questions. I'm just looking for the letter Q. No one's asked me questions. This is good. Because it means how can we see? Where am I here? So about halfway through comments. So this is a very quiet moment as I'll drink tea and read comments. Mm-hmm. Right. I can't see any cues. Perhaps people have. There's a lot of talk of AI. So I'll have a little chat about AI because I get that a lot. In all my comments, I always get people talking about my AI thumbnail. So for the record, I don't just go on any AI tool and create a thumbnail. There is a lot of manual work I do to edit, post, and to create. But in case you weren't aware, I used to work for a university University of the Arts, London. So the second best art university in the world, I think it was at the time when I was there. So we have hundreds of artists, architects, painters, dressmakers, and all sorts. A fantastic place, absolutely fantastic place, so full of creativity. And we had, and AI was, the LLM models were just popping up just before I retired. And because of my background, they asked me to help with that and provide input into their own policies as well as the UK university policies. And the fact is, AI is not going to go away. You have to teach students to use it. What you have to do, though, is teach them to use it ethically, to use an ethical AI systems. And there were systems such as Stable Diffusion or a tool called Leonardo that seemed to be more ethically, more ethical in its collection of data in order to provide AI. So providing, in my view, that we're using tools that are more ethical than some of these big tools like maybe perhaps Google or whatever, who just seem to be consuming anything in its path and deal with the consequences later. Meta had a very similar process, it seems, allegedly. Then I feel that is an acceptable way of viewing it. I mean, if you're anti-AI, you shouldn't be using YouTube. If you're anti-AI, you shouldn't be using online shopping because that is taking away jobs of programmers and data analysts and that. So I find it quite interesting where people think, where they stand on AI and how to make decisions. But to me, use ethical tools from companies that have licenses with people, that have a way of giving back to people whose data they use. That, to me, that is the best way of doing it. It's not a brilliant situation. We would all love to live in a perfect world where everything is created by hand, carefully crafted and loved, but that world just doesn't exist anymore. We can't do that. So we have to find a way to use it effectively, properly, and ethically. That's the important thing. So next up, Lindsay, Irving Finkel, can we have him debating with you on a podcast? Debating? I think I'll just be in awe and agree with him at most things. He is a fan of the Lewis chess set. I know that because I've spoken to him about that in the British Museum because I'm a member there, and occasionally he wanders around the Anglo-Saxon sort of part of the museum. and he looks at the Lewis chess set. I think it's one of the first things he ever bought as a child. He said, but yeah, I'd love to have a talk to him. I've never reached out to him to actually do that. So yes, I will do that. There's a few people I've reached out to talk to, and I've got some podcasts coming up next week. I have how can I forget who I'm having podcasts with? This is Jacob Behrman. I'm talking to about the origin of Yahweh. Next week, I'm talking to Garrett Prey, who does the Bard's Archive. I don't know what we're talking about. We just talk about anything, something academic. I talked to Jeff Lipman, who's a patron here. He has the Garden of Knowledge, I think he calls it now. Garden of Thought. That's what it is. Jeff has. And I was speaking to someone called Eldin, who does an art type podcast this week as well. So I'd like talking to people, and I have hopefully I'm going to speak to NEXT, yes, soon, who does tours around the world and goes to some interesting places in South America. Hilbert from History of Hilbert, he was on a few weeks ago saying he wanted to have a chat, and so I'll try and get that organised. And there's a few. So yeah, we'll do some more podcasts soon, that's for sure. Yeah, so let me whiz through more questions. Oh, Jeff Lifman is it? Hello, Jeff. I didn't even realise you were here, so good to see you. I cannot see any questions. People. Oh, right. So here's something for you. So I see people talking about how to use AI for research and where to get data from, and JSTOR and the like. So here's a little secret for you if you want to get hold of academic papers legally, okay? Because I know some people are familiar with tools that allow access to things you're not licensed for. And this is, yeah, and I've got to think about this because there's been a lot of change on the availability of papers. It means that I haven't been able to share many with YouTube members and patrons on a particular tier level where they're meant to, and I feel bad about that, and I don't know how to make up for that. But I'll work on it. But I may be able to share my Zotero with them, and which may allow that. I don't know, because I have all the papers on my Zotero, which is a way of storing your references when writing papers. But yes, if you are a student or a professor at a university, you will have an email ID, normally ended in edu in the States, but in the UK it's AC UK, and it's AC dot all over Europe. And this, if you log on to different sites, those sites such as De Gruyter or Science or something like that, will know that you're a member of an academic institution who have a license agreement with that company that allows you to access all that data. And that's great. But if you're like, I'd imagine at least half the people here are just enthusiastic mythographers who want to access the data but don't have an alignment to a academic institution. How do you access these papers legally without becoming a student? Because becoming a student can be very expensive. In the States, I have no idea how much it is. In the UK, it can be up to, well, £9,500, so probably about $11,000 or $12,000 a year to get access. That's far too much. So there is a way of accessing papers for less expense. Now, it may not be for free. It may be free depending on where you live. But most national libraries will have the same kind of access to online material as universities. So if you join your national library, so let's say the British Library in the UK, and you go to the British Library, you can then access all the academic material that you'd expect to access in the university. Normally, they give you that. But that can be a pain because you have to travel to that location. So how else can you do it? Well, there are some libraries that allow online access to them that then will allow you to pass through to have online access to academic material. I believe one such library in the UK, I think it's called the Library of London, has that, but you may find you have your own national libraries that do that, and that can be, there will be a cost perhaps with that, because they are organisations that need to break even. But I think the London Library is around £500 a year. Now, I don't belong to that. I've never used it, but I am aware of that, because I've been speaking to other people who have this issue that they're not associated with an academic institution. So £500 a year is a lot of money. That's £40 a month. But but it's far cheaper than joining a university, and you get access to perhaps an even greater field of data and academic material. So it's not ideal, but that is a way you can use to get access to academic information. Use your library, certainly use your national library, which would almost certainly have that. And if you're really serious about studying and research, and you're doing research projects that you're being paid for, consider joining a library like the Library of London to do that. Now, in terms of using AI for research, there's been some comments here I've seen saying things like ChatGPT are rubbish, and that's true. So certainly tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Google Gemini, they don't necessarily access academic papers directly. They tend to use what's available to people, so YouTube and Wikipedia. And so if I went on ChatGPT, I'd imagine if I typed in something like, "Could you tell me about mythemes?" It will probably come back with one of my own videos telling me, "Yeah, this is a great video on mythemes," which doesn't really help me. So there are actually AI tools that are designed to not hallucinate the papers that you can require for research. I use a tool called Consensus. Also, I rarely use it, but if someone says to me, "Could you tell me a little bit about something that I am not 100% familiar with," I may type that question into Consensus. It will give me sort of a vague idea of which areas are, well established and grounded, and the papers associated with that. And then those papers are real, and I can read those papers. So it's useful from that point of view. And they have a free level, so you don't have to pay for that, which is good. And the other tool I use is Litmaps. And I love Litmaps. So again, there is a free layer on that, and that you can put in a paper you're reading, and it will tell you all the papers that it is cited by. So papers further down the line, or indeed papers that cite it. And that allows you to build up a little map of papers that are linked to each other. That's really good. I was doing something the other day. What was I doing? The Who wrote a paper about the need for good data in the studying of folklore. And I think, I can't remember who it was. In fact, let me show you. That's probably the best way. I can probably do that. Let me log on to Litmaps. So if I share, hopefully some of you are interested in this. I don't want to bore you. Litmaps, share. So this is Litmaps. Okay, can it? Oh, they're different. So I'm going to have to share windows. Sorry. 1 second. This, I can't share a window. I've got to share a window. I've got to share a window to do that, isn't it? How do I do this? Right, share this screen. So there we go. See that? So this is Litmaps. And I was looking at De Hooy's paper on the study of folklore, and he got a letter in response back, and I wondered what was going on there. Narrative diffusion. So it's just updating. So it goes on. So De Hooy wrote, studying folklore diffusion needs a unbiased data set. And then what we find is that Boltonelli wrote a letter back saying, well, you're wrong, sort of thing. And I was quite interested to understand what came from that as part of the paper I'm writing, which I mentioned a little while ago. And so I just put these two in and said, show me all the connections. And there we go. So we get all these other papers. Got Lequelic, obviously he talks about his African myths. Jung has a few different interested. Are they two the same? No, they're different papers. But that's so LitMaps allows you to have a better idea of how to find papers associated with the research you're doing. Just say it's free to use on the basic stuff. I use it for a lot. If you look at things like pi dispersal, just so you can understand the sort of things I look at. So I have a whole heap of papers here. Lazarus, you're probably familiar with, who talked about that he had the paper on the genetic distribution, but it then shows you all papers on the edge that may be worth reading that are related to it. It does this for any of them. It's great tool, great way of identifying papers that you would not otherwise necessarily be aware of. So, yes, hopefully that's of use. So, Consensus and LitMaps both can have free tiers, and both for basic research are very good to get you going. Oh, I certainly wouldn't use those tools for any deep research. I know there are some people who do. I've seen videos on YouTube where people use these tools to try and write a literature review and the like, and or perhaps they do a good job, but I wouldn't trust it. If you produce something like that, please read it thoroughly first, and you'll probably have to edit 90% of it, I would say. But yeah, so that's what's going on there. So let me just carry on whizzing down, see if there's any other questions. Right, someone's saying take one class a year at university. So you can do at universities, they do things, I think they call them short courses. They used to call them short courses or things like that, but they're changing them now. So they were just starting this just as I left and retired, because I was on the project to create an online university. And the point of that was that anybody could come in and do any courses you want. And then once you've gained enough CAT points, so CAT points are the things we have in the UK to determine the value of the different courses. Once you've done enough courses to get enough CAT points, you can then get a degree. The thing is, if you do any courses you want to do, it's sometimes quite hard to define the degree that is appropriate for that. But certainly you can do those courses individually. So, I mean, I say University of Arts do them, but I know other universities, I mean, Oxford would do them. I'm sure Cambridge would do them. UCL does some. So you can do those, but they don't always give you email addresses to allow you to have access to those. Oh, excuse me. You can, there are some places where you can sign up to universities without paying. You get an email address and that may allow you some limited access. But yeah, there's no easy way of doing it. It is a pain. It is a pain. But hopefully that all makes sense. So that is where we are. So I think I've talked about everything I need to talk about. The main thing, but the interesting thing is that there'll be a slight pivot in what I'm doing to be create a world tree video. I'll get back on the case tomorrow to start that, and I'll get that out for next weekend. I'll pretty much have everything I want now for that. I'm missing a couple of stories, but the actual academic part I'm good with. But then after that, I will produce an academic paper on why certain narratives persist longevity-wise, which will have a solid ton of references in. It won't be like a gap analysis. It's just be a synopsis of that data, which I think would be a really good fundamental paper for anyone here to have in their back pocket, because it will tell you where to look at for the additional information you need. Once I've done that, I can make short videos about the different sections of that and put it in some kind of course format. So if you ever wanted to learn the study of folklore, folkloristics or mythology, you could use that. You have a really good background, and then once I've done that, I can then get the second paper out about more around the use of myth themes, and make a paper on that, and then that will give me good grounding to then hopefully next year write my book and balance that between doing a mythology database, and probably I'll try and create, once I've the academic sort of videos out of the way, to try and create one sort of documentary type video a month. That is my plan. But I hope that all makes sense to me. Questions popped up. Deacon Centre, can I talk about early atheist societies that didn't fully believe the myths or folklore? Okay, that's an interesting question. So if you're atheist, you're not religious, and if you're not religious, you wouldn't believe any myths, because myths are religious. You would certainly believe folklore, because folklore could, well, depending on how you define folklore could pretty much mean anything. It could mean songs you sing at a family gathering. It could mean games you play with your children. Folklore could be multiple things about culture. So do I know anything about societies that weren't religious? I'm not too sure. For the record, that I'm aware of any societies that weren't religious. Religion seems to be inbuilt within humanity. It's like we need it, which is a problem if you want to remove it. Because I know some people are talking about removing it or removing certain religions for various reasons. That is problematic problematic for those who believe in that religion, but problematic for, as a human, how do you live without religion? There's a whole field of philosophy around that. So you probably need to speak to a philosopher about that, to be honest, Deacon Centre, because I'm not aware of any specific sort of cultures in terms of those I talk about in mythological dispersal that did not have religion. But everybody has folklore. Everybody has folklore. So next question. Will you make a video about Hingus Heptom Neptos? Right. So you want me to go more into the Indo-European gods again? So yes, I could do that. I mean, I did stop, but again, I can do that next year. I can expand that. That's no problem at all. I did say I would if there was enough demand, and I think a lot of people did like the work I did on the Indo-European family tree and how I sort of put a de facto up and then said actually the de facto is wrong, should be like this, and to show why. So yes, I'm very happy to do that. Very happy to do that. Esmil, can you talk about the origins of the Phoenician Thracian god Sepozeus, who seems to have similarities to Indo-European cultures? Off the top of my head, I probably cannot do it justice, but I will quite happily investigate him. If he's from Phoenician and the Thracians, then absolutely, he from Phoenicia he would flow into Greece. The Thracians is already in Eastern Europe, so it's a question of where did he originate from, and that. But I'll quite happily look that up, and depending on what I find, I can either make a small YouTube member Patreon video or make a proper video about that if it's of interest. That's the problem. I don't know enough about the god off the top of my head right now. Elysian Empire. What's your thoughts on the genetic evidence saying that humans and Neanderthals diverged 700 to 900k years ago? See, it's not my specialist subject. It's hard because when did humans become human? When did Neanderthals become Neanderthal? When did they split differently enough to be considered different? and some people argue they didn't. So I believe I read somewhere between 1.2 and 1.5 million years ago, the split probably happened. But that's a more, I think, a Stefan Bilo type question. If you want a YouTuber to answer it, I don't know enough about DNA to answer that, other than yes, there was a ancestor. Some people thought it was Heidelgensis, I think it's called. I believe there's another name on the table, Ancestorsaurus or something. So it's not my field of expertise. I think there is controversy on whatever route you take. There's not 100% agreement. So I think we need more evidence to be sure, but I think it's slightly earlier in the timelines than 900K. But certainly it would be interesting to find out who that is, to understand if they had the ability to speak, or if we felt they had the ability to speak. That'd be really interesting, because then the question is, did the first humans and the first Neanderthals tell the same stories, and then those stories diverged with time? We never know, but it's an interesting thing to consider. Right, 1 second. I just got to blow my nose. I'm suffering from a slight cold here. You can't tell. I did take some pills before we started. 1 second. Okay. So, sorry about that. Did you see I've got another question. Did I see the article in Nature published on the 5th? A groundbreaking new discovery has just been pushed back the origins of AK fire. Yes. Oh, right, Elysian Empire. We did talk about that near the start of the show. So that was in East Anglia, so the eastern side of England. It was made by the British Museum. BBC had exclusive coverage of that, so it's on the BBC website and sort of nowhere else. And they were using what we call pyrite, so fool's gold, if you're familiar with that. So it tends to be a darkish stone which glitters gold. Little gold bits on it, using that as a marker to create a spark, as opposed to what I mentioned in the Neanderthal video, which is that the use of manganese to actually combust. So yeah, that was interesting. Looking for more cues. Do more cues. Question. Flabbergast. What do you think about the hypothesis that the lower merged statuette is actually a bear? So what we're talking about, I think, is this, which isn't going to. There we go. Say hello to everyone. Could it be a bear and not a lion? I don't think the head suits it for that. I think the body's too thin as well. So, I mean, it's not an impossibility. I mean, some people think it's a person in a lion's outfit. So, I'm not too sure what else to say about that. Then it's possible. No one knows for sure. So, yeah, I don't know what else to add. If it is in terms of the purpose of the statuette, though, it still probably was a narrative tool, like a mnemonic. Though. Right, take care, Jim. I'll see you in Custic, given to a history of Wolfman. I don't know who these people are. Yes. Bears stand on two legs. They do indeed, but I'd expect it to be slightly broader if it was a bear. Podcast with Paul Vevez on the computational study of linguistics. I'm not familiar with Paul. So clicking. But we could do that. I want to get my second paper out first, because I want to talk about phylogenetics a bit more, because phylogenetics, which is what we tend to use to trace origins back of myths, isn't without its problems. It isn't a silver bullet. There are different tools used for different jobs. And whilst phylogenetics can help us in the tracing of stories and narratives back, it can sometimes be overly confident in the maths. So we have used it, for example, to try and trace back the Indo-European language. I think that was part of the work Lazarus did. And I don't even remember the paper, but it had a graph of when the language could start. And the phylogenetic analysis said the Indo-European language could have started around 8,000 BC, so about 10,000 years ago, which is just too far back compared to the archaeological record and the migratory information we had. But that's what phylogenetics does if you don't enter data correctly. It gives you results that look mathematically correct, but are just incorrect to the archaeological record. Sometimes you need to apply the nuance and the understanding of the data and the language before you use it. One of the papers I was going to write would cover some of that, and I think I'd like to be clear on that in my head as a published piece of work before I spoke to someone about it. But I certainly would once I've done that. But I hope that sort of makes sense if you weren't familiar with that. So, Crecganford, to my current knowing, one thing that separates our human ancestor sites from Neanderthals, and Denisovans, is living with dogs. Any insights on dogs? No, I think dogs came to the picture around 50,000 years ago. So that's when Neanderthals and Denisovans were in decline, and a new wave of Homo sapiens, modern man from probably the Near East or around the northeast corner of Africa, came into Eurasia and wiped everybody out. It was those who I think probably picked up the dog, although I'm pretty sure, much like cats, I think dogs were probably self-domesticated, i.e. they decided to be with humans rather than humans necessarily tried to train them and domesticate them. I think there was probably a bit of that, but that's all I can say. But it makes sense that the new humans who had a cultural advantage would be the ones who took on the dog. That would make sense time-wise. Next question. The Gast again. Read about some people who had the first humans made from clay that were then baked in fire. Yes. Does this come from the earth diver myth where the mud is brought up? No. So earth from clay is a sort of a pottery, sort of post-pottery mythology. So Sumeria, Egypt, way Near East, where we see that. I did make a video. I think there was a clay one, sort of an a relatively unknown myth about the horse, the dog, and the man, which talks about that. But clays I would say, is a Neolithic creation myth. So when pottery was around, but that's, I think all the evidence points to that. Elysian Empire. Question: what are your thoughts on the idea that we have the wrong idea about human history, which is skewed to evidence bias, surviving artifacts, like the assumption that humans were the okay? So we do rely, archaeology relies on tangible evidence. You can make hypotheses where there is no data. You're entitled to, but you have to be honest about how you present that information. It's like the advanced ancient civilization hypothesis we see from a certain section of self-proclaimed historians. They're very good at only presenting the data that supports their needs. So they are biased in their own way, of supporting that. So really, you do have to have tangible information. And as much as you hear earlier, I talked about Irving Finkel and his hypothesis on writing, because we have seals, and seals suggest that there was writing, even though we don't have any writing of the age of the seals. So can we say there's writing for sure between 5 and 10,000 BCE? No, and we wouldn't. But we could hypothesize that is the case because of the seals, but that's as far as we can go. So hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, you got to treat your data properly. Hello, that Regnar from Northern California. Religious Studies Senior. Welcome. I think we're coming to the end of the chat, unfortunately, but welcome to stay. There's, I think, a few questions we're just dealing with. So, Riger Pete, have you heard of the stamp theory from the flattened round stone in Göbekli Tepe? Never mind, everybody else just arrived here. The stamp theory. Now this may be what I just literally just spoke about, which is the seal, the flat stone with iconography on it that seems like a seal. That's Irving Finkel has mentioned. We have talked about that throughout this. Whether that means there was writing. It's an interesting subject, as I say. I think the biggest challenge would be, yes, they could write on leaves in an organic way, and we have no evidence of that. But how would they write if they were writing cuneiform? So cuneiform tends to lend itself, I think, to writing in clay because of the tool used. So they must have been writing in a very different form to use organic materials, and we have no evidence of that. So that's the only counter to that I can see. But it is an interesting hypothesis, and certainly one I think that should be taken seriously. Irving Finkel is a true expert in his field of cuneiform. So I would listen to him with great interest, and I will reach out to him and see if he wants to come on and have a chat. I'm not sure if he'd like to do a live stream, but I'm sure I could get a moment with him. That's not a problem. So another question from Lindsay. In myths like Vlund and Dallas, etc., some myth themes are older than metallurgy. So who are the myths about before the metals? Oh, that's interesting. So there's the oldest folk tale we have is the Smith and the Devil, which is, or not the oldest, but one of the oldest fairy tales we have from the Indo-European culture is the Smith and the Devil, which is where the Smith sells his soul to the devil so he can join any two materials together. And what ends up, the Smith ends up, I think, getting the devil to stick to a rock, and then he convinces the devil to give him his soul back whilst maintaining the magic. So, very, very interesting tale. And that was 7,000 years old. And we thought that, how can that be 7,000 years old? There's no metallurgy going on. The Bronze Age has not yet started. But we do have evidence now that basic metallurgy was taking place at that time. So sometimes myths are truths. I say this all the time. They're not necessarily factually correct, but they are a truth. And sometimes there are some truth in them, such as if it's talking about metallurgy, then metallurgy must be happening, because you can't just make that up. You must know metal exists. So yes, so when that happens, we have to presume they had the materials they're talking about. One question, C.M. Allen. Hello. Is it reasonable to think that the Neanderthals is a good place to study the intersection of English and other European Pi languages? No. So the Neanderthals died out long before the Indo-European language, and the English comes pretty much from Indo-European languages such as French and Roman and Proto-Germanic. So no, I wouldn't say, if you wanted to understand Indo-European languages, certainly Proto-Indo-European languages, no, you'd have to literally go back to the recreation of Indo-European, which we have confidence in, although we may have the pronunciations slightly wrong. So when you look at Indo-European text, you often see asterisks and the like, and letters in italics that often suggest that the words could be pronounced differently. That's what that's hinted at. And so, yeah, we got a great idea of the words, but not necessarily the exact pronunciations. So it's been here an hour and a half. It's hopefully you've enjoyed that. This was the Crecganford vlog redone, and I hope you found it as enjoyable as the Crecganford vlog. I don't know how many of you actually watched the vlog. I've never really looked at the numbers. Hopefully you get an update of all the research I've done for the last week. We've talked about the writing, we've talked about linguistic evolution, we talked about Neanderthals, we talked about music, we talked about the academic information I'm going to produce over the next month or two, which I am really excited about, and I really hope that many of you love what that is. That will be a Bible almost for what we do. So really looking forward to that. Thank you all so much for your support, all the questions, just being here. If you can like the video, that would be brilliant. If you can subscribe to the channel or check that you are, that would be great. Not everybody, I've seen some people say they've been unsubscribed, which is odd. So just make sure you're subscribed. It's been a really wonderful 2025. I could do one more live stream this year. If you want one, maybe between Christmas and New Year, depending if people want a break from the festivities and their families and want to chill, drink tea and talk old stories. Perhaps I could even read an old story as a Christmas treat. So yes, it's been absolutely wonderful to see you all, to speak to you all. Yeah, I'm so privileged to be in this position. So yeah, thank you for everything you do, for supporting me, for liking and watching my videos. And yeah, I'll do one more live stream then perhaps for the end of the year, and looking forward to 2025 after that. So yeah, have great holidays if you can't come back and see that one. But yeah, next year there'll be lots more coming. So yeah, please, yes, stay safe and well. And I forgot to say this in the Neanderthal video. And this was Crecganford. Take care. Toodle pip.